Welcome back to Newsmaker Live, and thank you very much for staying tuned. We have a call on the line. We'll take that call in a second, but just a contribution from someone who texted a message. The person says, it is time that public servants become efficient. Stop coming into work at 9, going for breaks at 10, lunch at 12, return to work at 2, go pick up their kids at 3, while private workers have 1 hour for lunch and all private business done in that hour. Public servants abuse the system. They have impacted all business in their sick out and expect government to collect taxes to pay their wages. They need to meet the world and understand we all have mortgages, families, and visit the same supermarkets. A contribution from someone who texted. Let's take this call and then we'll talk about pensions. Good evening, caller. Thanks for holding. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just think it's important to clarify the concessions as it relates to the vehicles. A concession on a vehicle is revenue that government has not collected. It doesn't mean that government has collected that money and is reinvesting that money. The vehicles come in, they go into bonded warehouses. Only after the transaction of a sale has occurred does government collect revenue on vehicles coming into St. Lucia. So a concession on a vehicle doesn't mean that it is revenue that government has collected and is going to be reinvesting. It doesn't mean that. So it's important to understand that when we speak about concessions on vehicles, and do not speak to it in terms of taxpayers' money. Government has not collected that money as yet.
Well, I don't think that we're saying that the government has collected, but if 800 public or traveling officers are to buy vehicles, then government would have forgone whatever duties that it would have collected normally on the purchase of those vehicles. So that's the point that's being made there.
I think, but then you need to clarify the issue a little further, because somebody listening to the program doesn't understand that aspect.
Well, I mean, I take your point. However, I don't totally agree, because the government, as you said, only collects the duties after the vehicle is sold. However, we're talking about purchasing vehicles for public servants, so they would have to buy the vehicles to take advantage of the concessions. So that means that once they have taken advantage of the concession, then government would have forgone that revenue as the TUF is asking.
Okay, now I'd like to contrast that against where some sectors of the economy actually collect revenue on government's behalf and do not remit that money to government's coffers.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. I appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, you have been wanting to talk about the pensions and the difference. That's one of the conditions that you had laid out to government. Yes. Before we take this call, let me just have you speak on that issue. The pension, the difference between the pensions, the pension age, and the benefits that you get, or the age that you get the benefits.
Okay. One of the issues that we raised regarding, in fact, the conditions that we raised was the disparity that has happened in the pensions. As we heard from our president earlier on, that prior to 2003, every public officer who entered the service for the Public Service Commission would be appointed to a pensionable position. As of 2003, all persons, February 2003, all persons entering the public service, again through the Public Service Commission, which is the authority for employment in the public service, would be paying NIC. But there was one disparity that was never addressed. One, we can look at an individual at grade 3 who earns $1,522.40 in a pensionable position. If that individual were to pay no taxes on that salary, they would go home with $1,522.40. However, all those entering the public service after February 2003 are in receipt of the very same basic salary of $1,522.40. However, they go home with less take-home pay because they have to pay a 5% contribution to the NIC, which equates to just over $75, which means they're going home with just about $1,480 something, 89 thereabout dollars, which is, of course, two persons functioning in similar positions, sitting side by side, doing the same thing, but one is going home with less take-home pay and the other one going with more. And the person in the pensionable position is guaranteed the pension at age 55. Now, here's the disparity of the problem that we were alluding to. Persons who now pay NIC, their pensions are applicable under the NIC Act, and therefore the age of retirement is moving up to age 65, but we are at 64 at present. It's mandatory at age 55 that you ought to retire from the public service, and mandatory at 60 in the teaching service. It means that somebody in the public service at age 55 would have to leave the public service and wait until age 64. So they have approximately
9 years.
9 years without a salary, waiting for a pension, and have served the state for the full duration of what was prescribed. What we are saying is to adjust that, because unless the government decides that they're not going to fill that position, then one can say it's okay. But if government is going to continue to fill that position, the person who enters into that position would not be costing the government any more money, because they are actually taking over from a post that somebody left. Had that person remained in that post up to the age of 65, then that person would have had a salary, which would, of course, when we said it does not cost the government no money, that's what we meant. Because if the person is replaced, you only continuously paying a salary. So it is not an additional debt to the state, but rather it's just a continuation. And so we are saying that based on that anomaly, we want to sit with the government to put a mechanism in place to resolve that issue. And the government does find it difficult to accept a position like that, to sit down and discuss how we can cause those persons to benefit better, because we have now created a serious anomaly in the pensions, in persons entering in persons in pensionable positions and persons who are not in pensionable positions. And all we are saying to the government is that, look, we need to bring some closure to this matter so that the persons who are serving in those positions can have some comfort, knowing that when they get to those periods, they have a free mind and they're able to survive before actually retiring.
Now it's about time for us to wrap up. However, I wanted to touch on the Prime Minister's speech again, go back to it, and his call for arbitration. He made the pronouncement while the GNT, his representatives, and the TUF continued to negotiate. Does the TUF think that the Prime Minister's pronouncements were premature?
First, I would like to indicate that from our meeting of January 7th with the Prime Minister, he alluded to arbitration. We told the Prime Minister that we believe that it is not far between us or far from us to reach compromise on a settlement in the wage dispute that is going on at this wage negotiations, not this negotiations that are ongoing at this point in time. And as such, we do not believe, or we will not enter into arbitration, because we believe it is not past us to sit at the negotiating table and discuss and arrive at a settlement that is, of course, between the two of us, that is mutually accepted, though we may have our differences. So in terms of the Prime Minister's speech prior to us, we do not negotiate in the public domain in the media. We negotiate at the negotiating table. So in essence, the TUF did not hear what the Prime Minister said to us in the media. We are at the table negotiating with the GNT, the government negotiating team, and whatever we discuss, that's where we actually...
But you indicated that he alluded to arbitration from your meeting on January 7th.
Right.
So, I mean, this is not in the media. This is a face-to-face sit
but
down with the TUF. And if the Prime Minister is tending towards arbitration, or had been tending towards arbitration from then, why would the TUF not take a clue? And are there any fears on the part of the TUF that if it goes to arbitration, that some of the gains that you have made so far will be lost? Okay, when all the emotion is taken off.
Let's put it in
and
context.
When you look at the hard facts and figures.
Let's put it in context. I indicated that the Prime Minister alluded to arbitration. He didn't say that we have to go to arbitration, but he was suggesting that if we cannot settle, then we should go to arbitration. Again, he mentioned it in his speech prior to us meeting the GNT, the issue of arbitration. And he has been very instrumental in asking that it be binding, because arbitration by nature is not binding. Arbitration is basically an area where we meet and a neutral person sit and listen to both sides and try to bring some balance in the discussion so as to come up with an amicable solution or resolution to any impasse. And we are saying that we do not believe we need to go into that type of an environment to be able to solve the issues with the government. We believe that the government, either through the GNT or through the direct intervention of the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, that we can sit at the table and discuss the issues that are pertinent to both sides and arrive at a settlement.
Well, we have to leave it there because we are way past our time, and I want to thank you so much, Cyprian Montrop, the Vice President of the Trade Union Federation. Hopefully, we would have passed that point next week, so we would not have to have discussions on union negotiations anymore. But if we do need to, it would be nice to have the TUF and also some other representatives here with us for the program next week until we resolve the issues. Just a program note: Dual Off Factor Live tomorrow. Delia gets close up and personal with a woman who has spent many years affecting St. Lucia's tourism landscape. As part of DBS's International Women's Month recognitions, join Delia as she discusses the life, hopes and fears of Senator Berthia Paul, MBE, from childhood memories to regrets and achievements, to growing older and the issues that irk her. Be prepared for an opinionated discussion and intimate insight to a woman who describes herself as humble. That's DFL tomorrow, 8:30, only on DBS. That's all the time we have. Join us again next week at the same time for another Newsmaker Live. But before that, we'll be here this weekend for the Press Club. Join me for that program Saturday night, immediately after the news. Bye for now.